So what is the regulation? What are the regulations related to cryptocurrency in India? All the fuss about regulation started with the SC Garg panel appointed by the government of India in 2018. SC Garg panel outrightly recommended banning any kind of crypto transactions in India. This recommendation was taken ahead by RBI in 2018 itself, which said that it does not recognize cryptos as legal tender. And it also said that it would not provide any kind of financial services or any other services to entities engaging in crypto trading. Now, this was a very big statement because RBI provides uh, um, services of services of a lender to many of the scheduled banks, and it provides all regulating activity based services to all the entire of the financial sector. So this led to all the financial sector crypto agencies putting a petition in the Supreme Court. And Supreme Court in March of 2020, just last year, declared that RBI's ban on crypto is completely unconstitutional. The petitioners from the crypto side had said that this ban of RBI impinges upon the fundamental rights of my of an Indian citizen as a customer to use his choice of using what token should be used for transacting value. Side by side, the government of India is preparing a bill which is seeking to prohibit mining, holding, selling, trade, issuance, disposal, or use of any kind of cryptocurrency in India. The current draft bill also has a fine or an imprisonment up to 10 years if anyone is found holding cryptocurrency or trading in it. So this is a very scary scenario. But as of now, May 2021, the crypto sector is completely unregulated in India. And this is seen by n number of startups in the crypto space in India. Also, many of international bodies like IMF, World Economic Forum have estimated the people holding crypto assets in India of upwards of 10 million. There are more than 1 crore people who hold crypto assets in India. But we have to understand that there is this hesitancy of regulation and banning crypto emerges from money laundering fears and terror financing fears. India, as we all know, that geopolitically is situated in a very challenging space. Our Western neighbor always tries to destabilize it in one form or the other. And now our Northeastern neighbor is trying to push India to its limits. So it's understandable that the government has some apprehensions about it, but a regulation and a regulated sphere for this innovation to work in should be the way ahead. Also, government of India has not given any clarifications on the money laundering aspect. If it was so much concerned about cryptocurrencies being used for money laundering, then it should have at least given some guidelines under the Foreign Exchange Management Act, the FEMA, whether how the authorities should deal with people using cryptocurrencies for transactions or for any kind of money laundering. So how have the regulations spanned around the world? In Singapore, they have a Payment Services Act, which regulates the entire payments system in Singapore. Under this act, cryptocurrency is regulated, and all the crypto agents, the intermediaries, the people trading are registered under this act. Japan has similar kind of regulation and registration. European Union has clearly demarcated what are the anti-money laundering directives while using crypto, and what are the KYC norms, that is the know your customer norms, that should be followed. In United States, there is a state-wise license that is given to crypto exchanges. United States is a completely federal polity, hence this makes sense. Canada, as similar to European Union, has its know your customer KYC norms as well as anti-money laundering directives. But Canada has taken another step forward. It has introduced cryptocurrency exchange traded funds. Exchange traded funds are just like mutual funds, which prepare a basket of crypto assets for people to invest in. So Canada has created a legitimate financial instrument or a legitimate financial asset for the citizens of Canada to invest in. Also, the Financial Action Task Force, which looks at anti-money laundering or money laundering activity across the world, monitors it and tries to stop it, has also said that cryptos are not a threat to the global financial security. If all these countries and institutions have said that crypto is not a threat and it can be given chance to grow, then what should India do to make this happen? Let's look at the way forward. For crypto to have a good space built around in the Indian ecosystem, what we first need is a regulatory body. Now the question arises whether RBI should do it, whether because the cryptos hold some value and there is uh, asset monetary value involved, or should it be SEBI who should regulate it like it regulates the stock exchanges because there is trading happening in it, or should it be Insurance Regulatory Development Authority of India, IRDAI, because there is some kind of insurance that people need while dealing in such risky assets. What my suggestion is that cryptocurrency should have a multi-stakeholder regulatory body, that is have a few members from RBI, few from SEBI, few from IRDAI, and few from other regulatory bodies, which in such a way that the crypto asset, whatever part of the economy it's going to affect, a representation is included in this body. This authority, that is the multi-stakeholder authority, can be set up in your Gujarat International Finance Tech City, the GIFT City, under the International Finance Authority, IFSCA. Also, like RBI has norms for banks, these norms are for net worth requirements, your reserve ratios like CRR, SLR. Then there are norms for quality of management in a particular bank, norms related to KYC, norms related to audit. In fact, recently RBI has been pushing so much about reforming the audit sector of banking. Similarly, we can have such norms for crypto intermediaries or crypto exchanges. This is how we are going to create this entire ecosystem in India. Also, while there is a transition of this unregulated sector to a regulated sector, during this transition, we can use the current existing laws in India, such as the Consumer Protection Act, the Indian Penal Code, and various state government laws relating to deposits. Because at the end of the day, it's all matter of a finance game and money or monetary value exchanging hands. As we are doing this, we have to also ensure that there is financial literacy amongst our citizens. Many of us do not know how a speculative stock exchange works. How are we then supposed to know a complicated asset like cryptocurrency, where there are so many technologies involved? There's blockchain, there is this hash code, hash function. There are so many n number of things that go into cryptocurrency, which are related to technology as well as the economy. So, surround a comprehensive financial literacy course can be started. This is also a good startup idea for people watching this podcast, that you can start such things. I'm sure many established startups like Zerodha uh, and many more have started financial literacy courses online, but people can do this around cryptocurrency as well. The best Indian institution right now to understand and deal with cryptocurrencies is the income tax department. It has a manual of itself of how to treat crypto assets, how to treat the gains from crypto assets. So the regulatory treatment can be learned from how the income tax department is dealing with it. At the end, if nothing is to be done by the regulatory body, we can just treat crypto assets as foreign assets. The way we deal today in the New York Stock Exchange or in the Beijing Stock Exchange, we can have treatment for crypto like these. Rather than investing it, treating it like a domestic asset, we can treat it like a foreign asset and treat it via our GIFT International Finance FinTech City. So that was my part. And now let's start the Q&A session around everything related to cryptocurrencies. So Anurag and Jayavardhan, we have discussed cryptocurrencies and various aspects of it. Shall we start the discussion around this?
Yes, sure, Surya.
Sure, Surya. Thank you for the presentation.
Okay. So what should we take up first? Should we start with origins of money? Do you guys have questions about the origins of money, or should we directly come to cryptocurrency part?
I had one question that involves that is on the overlap of origins of money and the start of cryptocurrency. So the origins of money in a conventional sense is that there is a federal central authority which guarantees whatever note we have. So if you have a 500 rupees note, there is a Reserve Bank of India that guarantees that this note has that much of a value. And on the other hand, there is this entirely different end of the spectrum wherein there is no central authority in cryptocurrency, and every person and every node of the system has the authority to change the blockchain, which gives cryptocurrency its validity. So I believe that these are two very different extreme ends of the spectrum. And so did we see any kind of middle grounds in between in terms of technology such as digital currencies, or was this shift inevitable from a central authority to no authority at all?
Okay, that's a very good question. And let's first look at entire currency system that has evolved post World War II in a macro perspective. Okay.
Hmm.
So post World War II, we had the dollar, which was the most dominant currency because of US's predominant position in the entire international ecosystem and economy. Dollar was based upon the gold standard, that dollar will have a specific value depending upon the value of gold, right? Then what happened was, because it was a fixed value, the exchange rate of dollar did not necessarily signify the value of dollar, because the pressures of international trade supply and demand come into play here. If I am US and I have an international trade share of $1 trillion, and say you are India and you have an international trade share of only say $200 billion. If I am transacting so much more, you are depending so much upon me for some of the goods and services, then how can my rate of dollar be fixed to your rupee, right? So this is where entire game changed. The dollar, the gold was removed as a standard, and then we came into the realm of dynamic currency prices. So today we can see that the rupee and the dollar, or the rupee and the yen, or yen and the dollar, on a day-to-day basis have a fluctuating exchange rate, right? And this fluctuation takes into account all the domestic policies of the central bank of that nation, the international trade weightage of that nation, and that's why this fluctuation was good. But then came in 2008, where there was an entire financial collapse of the Western hemisphere, of the Western economies, right? And Bitcoin was started post 2008 crisis, where people were just fed up that okay, some institutions who are too powerful are managing the money any way they want and only for their cronies. So then came in this Bitcoin system, or a cryptocurrency system, where you had complete decentralization as opposed to complete centralization. But now, if we have to look at a balance between complete centralization and complete decentralization, we have to take a middle ground. And I think Tether, the cryptocurrency that you mentioned, is the best to make this balance happen. And I'll tell you why. Because Tether is based upon the value of US dollar, it is linked to the real economy, right? And we are using cryptocurrencies. The first reason for use is the seamlessness across geographies, right? Having a cryptocurrency which is linked to the real economy and having the seamlessness gives you the balance that the cryptocurrency is going to have. On the other hand, other cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin do not have this link to the real economy, and that's why we have seen that it is more of a speculative asset rather than a transacting medium, right? There was a time in 2016 to 2018 where Bitcoin was hitting new highs on a daily basis, and there was nothing that explained this phenomena. It was only because new people were entering the market of cryptocurrencies and buying Bitcoin day after day. But it had no link with real economy, so it also crashed very bad. So I think Tether, which is linking a real economy via US dollar, will be this middle ground and the future of cryptocurrency, according to me.
Thank you, Surya. I think when you explain the chain of events, it does put things into perspective of why we went from a centralized system to a completely decentralized system. And yes, even I agree that more often cryptocurrencies are thought of as an asset, which gives them this volatile nature. But yes, having a stable cryptocurrency would actually result in utilization of these in form of a currency, digital currency. Yes.
True, true. I mean, seamlessness is the best aspect that attracts me towards cryptocurrency. If I am today in India buying a dozen apples for, say, 500 rupees, and if tomorrow I go to New York and I want to buy a dozen apples, I'll have to go to Western Union, convert my money, go to exchange rates, what is good for me. But if I am holding Tether today in India and going to New York and just transacting it on Tether, then I'm quite comfortable with it. I've been saved a lot of headache around my physical working. So if seamlessness of transaction is balanced with its linkage to real economy, I think it will be a good crack.
Correct.
So I had one more question, Surya, regarding the origin of money and what you told just now. Like, I was curious, why cannot there be like cryptocurrency is a system, so it takes out the inefficiencies, that why should I need to convert a currency to another currency, even changing geography? It takes into account the aspects that you told, that all currencies are not at par. Some are highly used, some have a higher stake in global trade. The purchase power parity is because of the currencies. But I had one question, and why cannot be there a universal, say, token which is, say, agreed upon by all the countries? So say they could be that $1 by 100 of that, say that token is named XYZ, that 100 XYZ tokens are bought using $1. Similarly, I can pay 100 rupees to buy, say, 50 XYZ tokens. So there is an equivalent, I can convert it into that token, and throughout across the world, there are the commodity prices are in that token. Say I want to buy a Starbucks coffee which costs 50 XYZ tokens. So there is a singular currency which I can convert, which does not get constrained with borders and all, and still has been in some way accounted for, has taken into care the purchase power parity and different currency usage, and at the same time there are commodity equivalent prices in that currency. So why cannot such a token exist?
You're absolutely right, Anurag. In fact, today, all the currencies that we use today are token currencies, right? Because they are not backed by any certain commodity. It was gold initially, but it's not now. So the entire debate around crypto is because there is a lot of volatility in it. Cryptocurrencies are also tokens that are helping us transact and helping us make sure that value has been transferred. And yes, there can be tokens, and crypto is doing that work. But the only challenge presented by crypto is the great volatility part. If, say, I was holding a crypto in the first week of May, it was worth around $60,000, right? One Bitcoin.
Yes,
And,
around 65,000 was the high.
Yeah, and in the first week of May, if I say I had planned, I'll buy a new car, a wonderful car using Bitcoin. I say I'll buy a Tesla, right? Because all the hype was around Tesla accepting my Bitcoins. At the end of the month, it has fallen immensely. Where a few of my Bitcoins would have bought a car for me, it's not buying that same car. And this is where the challenge of cryptocurrency as token money comes into place. That the volatility is so much that I cannot have a stable, predictable economy if it is only based upon cryptocurrencies. And that is why let me give a disclaimer here. I have no stakes in Tether. Tether is something completely new to me, introduced by Jason today. My only emphasis on Tether is because it is being linked to the real economy while by usage of US dollars. Now, let me make another point here. If, say, Tether had the backing of a basket of currencies, like which are the biggest economies in the world today? It's US dollar, it's US, China, European Union as a whole, and Japan. So if we have a cryptocurrency which is backed, or which is not backed, but based up, the value of the cryptocurrency is based upon a basket of these currencies, like the US dollar, the euro, the yen, and the renminbi, then it makes sense because it is more linked to the real world. And at the same time, it is a token. So whatever dynamics happen in the real economy, if, say, China goes on to be the first number one economy in GDP terms, then the weightage of Chinese currency, renminbi, will just change but the token and the trust behind the token will still remain because it is so much linked to the international system. And that is my answer to it, Anurag.
And if I could add to that, so Anurag mentioned that why is it not feasible to have one kind of currency which can work anywhere around the world in a similar fashion? So I think that the current way in which currency works is that we have different geographies in which there are different uh, bodies which guarantee money, which guarantee currency. So the approach towards having a uniform world currency would be having one institution that uh, guarantees that particular currency in entire world, or the approach can be there is no governing institution. There is a currency which is guaranteed everywhere, but there is no governing institution, central institution. So out of these two approaches, I think cryptocurrencies it follows the second approach and is kind of occupying that space wherein if cryptocurrencies are utilized in major economies, it will push different parts of the world to adopt cryptocurrencies in future as well. And that might actually lead to not only utilization of cryptocurrencies as an asset, but if they are utilized as a currency, it might make them more stable as well, is what I think.
Yeah, you're right, Jayavardhan. In fact, having an international body in the current geopolitical system where no one is able to agree upon anything, it's really good and ideal, and that should be the way. But I just hope that countries are able to solve their multilateral differences today in United Nations before we bring in a new body where only the powerful again dominate, like how it happened in World Health Organization, by the way. So, moving forward, I have a general query. Anurag, you spoke about artificial manipulation of the real economy by central banks. But if I am the governor of RBI, having a real currency at least and powers related to it at least gives me some levers to pull and push when there is some turmoil like one presented by COVID-19. So how would we look at this scenario then? If there is no-
One is that like with certain black swan events like COVID-19, but there are certain cases where like there is one part of the ecosystem which is a lot of time not happy. For example, a deposit holder receiving less amount of interest than the previous year would not be very happy. Like again, I'm not taking inflation and all into account. At the same time, a business enterprise or a corporation getting a high rate of interest may not be happy. So reducing the interest for a corporation may also impact the rates that are offered to the saving holder. So here, like, there is a discretion of a singular body which has to balance it, and the balance sometimes come from a midterm vision or a long-term vision, where you may sacrifice some of the things in the short term or the midterm. You may offend a part of the ecosystem. So that may be a case that may exist if there is a central authority. But yes, as you said, all these things are not existent in a cryptocurrency. So it is a entirely free market. So a demand, supply, all those things. If there also, where in fact artificial manipulations can be created. So for example, if a cryptocurrency is worth say $1 billion, if someone comes in with a weightage of 10 30 or 40 30 or 40% or 50% of the say $1 billion with a $500 million of cash kitty, which is not something that cannot be thinked of. There are banks recently who are entering these crypto markets and all. They can also artificially manipulate and at the end up making money, where smaller retail holders or smaller holders end up losing money. So artificial manipulation can exist there as well, but a lot of basic hyper tuning measures do not exist in cryptocurrencies, which have a both act as it's a double-edged sword. It has advantages in certain aspects, it has disadvantages in certain aspects.
Okay. It makes sense now. So, continuing from that question, today, if I have say a debit card of any international bank which has a good presence, then my bank debit card I can use it in Mumbai, in New York, in Tokyo, in many of the countries where international trade is happening. I don't even need to sometimes go to the exchange place and make sure that my dollars are converted into local currency. If there is such seamlessness because of digital technology in place today, then why do we even need a digital currency, let alone cryptocurrency? It's
So
open.
it is available, so you can transact. You have like these days international debit cards. You can purchase on any e-commerce site, any country. You can go to a ATM in another country, just do a transaction, swipe your card. You have credit cards. In fact, a lot of banks do have international relationships with the other banks and all, but it is about the costs that are or like one aspect is costs that are incurred to make that transaction happen. So whenever you are transacting, say you went to US, you are using an Indian debit card, you have to pay the exchange rate which is there, then a markup fee for the bank. So that is how they are making the money and all, and which may not, like in case of cryptocurrency, they do not exist or are next to null. So you do not need to have like, so similar infrastructure can be adopted by a bank to reduce those number of people who need to exist for that, number of buildings that need to run, number of infrastructure that need to be deployed. So banks charge for that as well, so for to make those transaction and seamlessness happen. In case of cryptocurrency being decentralized, being managed by actors of the network or stakeholders of the network itself, like it is supporting the ecosystem, so it is a self-sustainable system. They do not require an office with a server or backups and a high bandwidth internet line, someone to and to maintain that. They do not require those markups and all on transactions.
Okay. So the fees part is the fees charged by all these financial institutions while crossing geographies is an advantage for having crypto-based transactions in international trade compared to a real currency-based transactions. Is that right?
One of the advantages, yes.
One of the advantages. Okay.
Because
Also,
again, it leads to that inefficiency. Like if you say, for example, you are from India, you are traveling to say Sri Lanka, then Sri Lanka you decided to go to Germany, then to France, then to say Japan, then to say Middle East, then to say US. Every time you are incurring a loss, your total amount of money gets reduced in spite of like for all these inefficiencies, because every time you have to make a transaction happen for which there are certain intermediaries needed.
yeah, yes, Anurag. It makes sense to me now. So, regarding blockchain, you said that these are blocks that are placed in a network, and this network is joined by many of the players involved in the network, and each of the player is then a node. So, in this one block, is there actual data being stored? Like, say, if I am joining the blockchain and my computer is part of the blockchain, so will my computer be used to save data, or will it be just used to save the address?
So if you are, so there are two aspects to it. So one is that if you are a miner, yes, you'll have to download the entire ledger, which again gets synchronized with the entire network. So you'll have to have that kind of data space on your computer or PC to save that enormous amount of data if you are a miner. But if I am want to do a transaction using Bitcoin, I do not necessarily need to save that entire the blockchain. I can just go to a, like if I want to buy cryptocurrency, transact using cryptocurrency, I can just go to sites, use my wallet address, and those transactions are then pushed by that intermediary site or the exchange onto that network.
Okay. So if I just want to use it as a transaction mechanism, I don't have to be a part of the network. I can just go
No,
to
you don't.
a agency. Okay, understood.
Yes.
My next question, does Jayavardhan have any questions for Anurag?
No, I think your questions covered a lot of doubts that I had in mind. So yes, we can go ahead.
So we can go ahead with asking some queries related to Jayavardhan's part. So Jayavardhan, let's talk about Elon Musk first, and the speculation and volatility, because not just Elon Musk, but the speculation in cryptos due to tweets given by some big names. is it necessary for the international economy to have a digital asset which is only creating value based on speculation?
I think that the reason the founders of Bitcoin or the founders of any kind of altcoins, the reason they invented these kind of cryptocurrencies, I don't think that it was having a kind of a digital asset as comparable to having stocks or other kind of investments. So I think the reason for inventing these kind of cryptocurrencies was to have a replacement to the conventional money that we have, and at the same time catering towards the drawbacks of the conventional money and the conventional currencies that we have. So I think if we look at it at that way, I don't think having a digital currency that is thought of as an asset and its value, whose values is based on speculations, is something that is very much necessary. So personally, I feel that people are currently investing in Bitcoin more of as an investment rather than having a currency for transaction, which is the current state. But I think that having uh, a time where we can utilize these currencies in the form in which they were intended, of utilizing them in form of transaction, would be a much better scenario, in which these currencies would show less volatility and could be utilized for actual useful trades as well.
Okay. Okay, it makes sense because it was never intended to be a financial
Correct.
asset. It was intended to be something uh, for transactions.
Correct.
Always.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Also, regarding if it is only meant for transactions, then will it not? Will the entire domain of cryptocurrencies be not affected if there are multiple cryptocurrencies? Because then there will there will not be any seamlessness. If say 100 traders in India, out of which 20 are accepting Bitcoin, 10 are accepting Ether, Ethereum, 10 are accepting Tether, we have again lost the game there, right?
Correct.
What will be the solution to that?
I think if we consider the perspective of an end customer, if I have to buy, let's say, a car, then from my perspective, I should be able to utilize the cryptocurrency that I own at that particular vendor that sells the car. So if I own Ethereum or Ripple or Tether or anything, I want that particular vendor to be compatible with that kind of a technology. So from a customer's perspective, it should make sense that everyone supports the maximum number of technologies that is available out there. So we have a similar system in different kind of restaurants where they have different credit cards which are supported, different credit cards which are not supported. So this is very much similar to that. From a technology perspective, there are slight differences in the concepts behind Ethereum or Bitcoin or other altcoins such as Tether or Dogecoin. So in connection to these basic differences in terms of the inception of these cryptocurrencies, I believe that there will always be some kind of deviation from what the exchange rate of that particular currency with respect to a particular stable currency, so let's say a dollar. So I think that will always exist. But even in the current scenario where we have different global currencies, people still tend to hold on to a particular currencies. For example, US dollar is considered very stable, or Swiss franc is considered stable, or Japanese yen is considered very stable. So people kind of hold on to these currencies and then they convert these when the rate is high, when they can make profit. So I think this kind of a situation will always exist. Even if there is more stability to cryptocurrencies, people will still hold cryptocurrencies and try to exchange it when their value is very high. So these kind of things will still exist, but if these speculations and the asset part of cryptocurrency kind of dissolves in the near future, I think that there will be stability, but there will be some minor differences in different platforms such as Ethereum, Ripple, Dogecoin, etc., based on their basic concept of inception.
Okay. Thank you, Jayavardhan. That answers my question. Anurag, do you have any question for Jayavardhan?
No more questions. But just to add to it, there in the ecosystem, there have been new players, just like fiat currency exchanges, which actually just you do not need to care about what the other guy is expecting and what cryptocurrency you have. You can transacting in the cryptocurrency that you hold, it automatically in the middle changes hands with whatever the vendor is accepting.
And I believe that cryptocurrencies is ultimately based on the concept of blockchain, and giving more promotion to cryptocurrency platform and utilization of cryptocurrency will give more companies coming up with expertise in blockchain will still have even more significant impact in other spheres of industries as well, not only cryptocurrencies but also different health insurances or different supply chains, etc. as well.
Okay, so summing up, crypto was meant to be a transaction mechanism. Let's keep it that way and remove the financial asset part of it, where we can ensure that this cryptocurrency will be used as a thing that it was meant for. Also, regarding the legitimacy part of cryptocurrency, Fidelity Asset Management, which is the world's largest asset management company and has $5 trillion worth assets under management, has also started a different fund for cryptocurrencies. So this lot of such big firms, I'm sure that Blackstone has also started a fund around cryptos. So a lot of such firms, when enter the market, along with governments like Government of Canada and Japan, make sure that there's legitimacy to this transaction mechanism which has been in question for so long. Also, adding to that, I'll just add a point that I came across. There are upwards of 101 million people across on Earth that are holding crypto assets. Worth, I guess, $600 billion was the market cap of cryptos, right?
600 was, I think, Bitcoin alone.
Just
Okay,
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin alone. So $1.2 trillion of value is held in cryptocurrencies today, and it's almost half of India's GDP. So I hope that there is regulation to this sector, and it is used only for transactions. Anurag, do you have any other queries or points?
No, I don't have anything else.
Okay. So it was a wonderful session, discussion around cryptocurrencies, and it has at least given me some good food for thought. So let's end the session here. And
Okay.
we'll meet again next week. You can write to us to PBNJ podcast. Our communication address, mail ID will be given in the description. And thank you for watching PBNJ podcast. And we hope that you continue this journey with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.